Hi everyone, this is Dan Gregg. I'm not going to read to you today. Well, I'm going to use my book as a prop here. So what I want to tell you is I want to tell you the story of Egypt, or the history of Egypt. The founder of Egypt is named Misraim. So let's look at the start of this here in the chronology. All right. So we'll start here with the flood. And we have the flood year here, which is in 2483 BC. And you can see details of the flood year here. Okay, so in the lineage of, I have a few lifespans here. Look around the camera here and see what I see. Okay, here's Ham right here. Fingers pointing towards Ham. Alright, and I have only made a good guess at Ham's age here. And his son was Cush, so I've made a good guess at Cush here. And you can see, or actually, no, it goes Ham, Canaan, then Cush. Okay, so Canaan, as I pointed out in other places, was born on the ark. So this is the disembarkment here. Okay, so we have Ham, Canaan, Cush, and then we have the fourth generation here is Misraim. Okay, so he was also born soon after the flood, and he was the founder of the nation of Egypt. So some of Noah's sons took up hunting, and they migrated vast distances after the flood. They were following game. The game was expanding much faster than the human population. And so, let's see, all right. So we're concentrating on Mitzrayim here. And Mitzrayim went to, and his sons, or his descendants, went to Upper Egypt. So there's a scripture that says that the birthplace of Egypt was in Upper Egypt. Now, you have to know that Upper Egypt means up the Nile toward the headwaters. So if you look at a map of Egypt, it's actually in the south of Egypt. So Noah's other sons went other directions. Nimrod toward the plain of Shinar. Now, other than drawing in the beginning of this migration here, I haven't put any more of the chronology of Egypt in, because the chronology of Egypt is in too much disarray, and Scripture doesn't discuss what's happening except to say where the first Egyptians went and where they originated. So we're going to skip about 100 and, let's see, 2483 BC. We're going to skip over the Akkadian Empire. Okay. And we're going to start Egyptian chronology with the third dynasty. This is where a significant change in pyramid building from bricks to, from just using mud bricks to trying to use stepped up structures occurred. And the reason I didn't include the dynasties of 1 and 2 is that they're in too much disarray, and we don't know how they were arranged. But there is ample time here to figure out how those dynasties go, because we're down here to about 2300 BC. You can see, I start the third dynasty in 2303 here, and the flood was in 2483. So that appears to be, to me, it'll be about 180 years. 180 years. Okay, so in 180 years, I mean the history of the United States up to, what, about 1950 or so, was about that long, and it hit 200 years in 1976. Okay, and we're let's see, we're about 50 years beyond that now, so they were somewhere around 250 or 260 years. But you can fit a lot of history. If you know, you can fit a lot of history in that period. So there's plenty of space. And some of Dynasty 1 and 2 could have been parallel. Populations could have increased very rapidly. The United States went from a population in that period of time, from about, what was it at the time of the Civil War? 10 million, 3 to 10 million, so now we're 300 to 60 million. So the population can increase immensely too, and so more labor and manpower becomes available for different projects. So I start Dynasty 3 here in 23, about 2300 BC here. Okay, so this is not too controversial. As I mentioned in the previous video, Egyptologists have brought the chronology of Egypt down. So there's a little bit of guesswork in here, but I've tended to use the shorter chronology of the third dynasty here. So we have a pharaoh named Djoser here from Dynasty 3. Okay, and I assigned Djoser 19 years. And then during his reign we have the Step Pyramid. And I put the volume of the pyramid to indicate the size of the project. 330,400 cubic meters. And also the place it was built, which was Saqqara. Okay. And then the next pharaoh is Nebka. And then we have Djoser, who was pharaoh for, let's see, to look around the camera, 19 years, and then the pharaoh named Huni, and then we're looking over here contemporary with Terra. Now, the lifespans of the Egyptians were much shorter than the lifespans of the patriarchs, and that was because of their lifestyle, their diet, and their culture brought down the lifespans of Egyptians severely. Okay, so the chronology of the Akkadian Empire here, which is sitting over here, is much more secure. They're contemporary to this period of Egypt, the third dynasty. Okay, so let's turn the page over here. And the next pharaoh we have in line here is from the fourth dynasty, and this is Sneferu. Now, I probably don't pronounce all these words exactly right. I can only guess from their English, because I'm not an Egyptologist. They might do better at pronouncing them. Okay, so the chronology for the fourth dynasty comes from what's called the Palmero stone data. Okay, and this isn't strictly a reign length chronology. It's a cattle count. How many cattle counts were during the reign of each pharaoh, and there's a dispute as to whether they conducted an annual cattle count or a biannual cattle count. And my presumption, since the chronology of Egypt is shorter, is to use the annual cattle count, and I think that makes sense because cattle multiply on an annual basis, not a biannual basis. And for taxation purposes, you'd want to count them once a year. Okay, so that's what this chronology of the fourth dynasty is built on. So we have, during the reign of Sneferu, the Median Pyramid, which is 63, about 638,000 cubic meters, and it suffered a sudden collapse. And then we have the Bent Pyramid, which shoots up to over 1 million cubic meters, and that's at Djoser. And then we have the Red Pyramid, which is even larger, which is 1,694,000 cubic meters. That's also at Djoser. So the population must have been quite large here at this time. Okay, and this is again contemporary with the early life of Abraham and Terah. Um, and then we come up to the fourth dynasty, Pharaoh Khufu, or I guess in the Greek they call his name Cheops. But under his reign, the Great Pyramid was built, and that's 2,583,283 cubic meters. And again, the reign lengths here are based on the Palmero stone, or the cattle counts. And his reign length here we have at 14 years, okay, and contemporary with the Sumerian king list, the Gudian kings over here, which is an overthrow or an incursion into the Akkadian Empire here for a time. Okay, now the reason we have all this detail in the chronology is because the biblical chronology I constructed first, and it enabled us to solve the problems that were the other chronologies that occasionally drop into a black hole for lack of information. But that's not the case with Scripture. There's enough information to figure it out. So after Khufu, we have a pharaoh called Jephthah. Is that how you pronounce that? Okay, so he has an unfinished pyramid of, you can see that, 131,000 cubic meters. And then we have Khafra, and we've allotted 15 years for him. And there's a very large pyramid built at the end of his reign, 2,211,000 cubic meters. And then I believe we're still on Dynasty 4 here. And then we have the last pharaoh of the dynasty here in a much decreased size pyramid and a shorter reign here of the last king for 2 years. And we come to Dynasty 5. Okay, so the Egyptians' cattle count is basically based solely on historical record. There's no astronomy to speak in it. So the astronomy you see over here is related to the Akkadian and the Ur-3, or the Uruk. Yeah, Erech, or Uruk. Okay, so Erech is the biblical name of the city. Okay, so let's flip over the page here. So, see what we have. So we have the first intermediate period beginning after the end of the, I believe this was the 4th dynasty. Let's see, Dynasty 5. Okay. Which I guess is very short here. Okay, so this is because things are going parallel. So the first intermediate period means Egypt is being ruled by competing or parallel dynasties. Okay, this is where our solution comes into the Egyptian chronology to show how it lines up with biblical chronology. Okay, so the second intermediate period, okay, so we have the 5th dynasty pharaohs that are ruling in Lower Egypt, or in the Delta region, okay, and parallel to that we have the 8th dynasty coming in here. And if you want to wonder what happened to the 7th dynasty, but even I mention it here, probably not, but that's because these dynasties are too obscure, and Egyptologists don't consider that they many kings. So you see there's no years with the 7th dynasty here, and we have a period of climate change. Climate killed Akkad, turned it into a barren desert. So the 5th dynasty continues to rule in Lower Egypt, but we have we have in Upper Egypt, we have competing dynasties, okay. So the fifth dynasty is neglecting Upper Egypt, so that's why I'm calling this the first intermediate period beginning. Okay, so we come down here to the final pharaohs of Dynasty 5, Unas, and we get Dynasty 6 here with a pharaoh named Teti. But still in Upper Egypt we have Dynasty 7, I allot 50 years for it, just the amount of time I allot. Recurrent famines. Okay, so the capital of Upper Egypt is Thebes, okay, and when we come in to get some actual numbers and dates here, we get the 11th dynasty here. Okay, so the 11th dynasty is ruling in Thebes and Upper Egypt, but Egypt isn't unified, okay, so but the 5th dynasty, and as I said, the 6th dynasty are ruling contemporary to the 11th dynasty. So the 11th dynasty is ruling in Upper Egypt, starts with Mento Intef 1, and then we have Mentuhotep 1, and then we have Intef 2, all parallel to Dynasty 5 and 6, which is ruling in Lower Egypt, in Memphis, and Dynasty 11 is in Thebes. And then in between them we have even more competing dynasties, okay? So you see the center column here without any dates here. This is Dynasty 9 and 10 I've got in there. So the intermediate period is competing dynasties in Egypt. Alright, so we have some links between Mesopotamia and Egypt in a burial jar of, I think it's pronounced Monet or Montet, if you want to butcher the French but say the English. The Montet jar at Byblos. Okay. And then so we're coming down here to the later life of Abraham and Terah connection. Okay. And so this is when Abraham goes to Egypt. So I have this toward the end of the 6th dynasty, or not the exact end, but during the reign of Pepi I, okay? And again, they're doing cattle counts, okay? So the Pharaoh gave Abraham lots of cattle after he was compelled to give Sarah back to him, okay? But the 11th dynasty is still ruling parallel to the 6th dynasty here, okay? So my camera's going to cut off at some point here, but we'll see how far we can get before this happens. Okay, so we have the 6th dynasty, Pepi II, and then we get Mentuhotep. Which Mentuhotep II there is that? 2, okay, but Mentuhotep II unified Egypt, but not at the very beginning of his reign did he do this. The 6th dynasty petered out here to Pepi II and how do you say that? Menrenrir II and the Pharaoh with a question mark, Sitpah. Okay, so during the reign of Mentuhotep II, the reign of Egypt was unified again, okay? And Egyptologists think, well, it was unified from foreign invaders, but actually the 11th dynasty overcomes the 6th dynasty and takes all of Egypt, okay? And so I've mentioned Saqqara king list before. That gives us the big clue here as to what happened. It skips directly from Pepi II of Dynasty 6 to Mentuhotep of Dynasty 11. So it's like you were asking the priest who did this list, who was the legitimate ruler of Egypt, and he's trying to argue for a unified Egypt. So he wants to leave out the early 11th dynasty down to Mentuhotep, and then he's only going to acknowledge unification here in the Saqqara king list. Okay, so then we have the 11th dynasty alone, Mentuhotep II, then we have Mentuhotep III, and then we're using the Turin canon here, which assigns reign lengths to some of these kings here. Mentuhotep IV. Okay, and there's a lacuna there, so we filled it in. Okay, and we're getting down to Dynasty 12 here, and the capital is moved to a place called it's Jaweh, okay, which is north, which is up more in Upper Egypt than Memphis. Okay, but they're still tending to cling to central Egypt here more. And we have Amenemhep the First. So this is the big secret here to taking the remaining error out of Egyptian chronology is to overlap the 6th dynasty and the 11th dynasties and show that, or postulate that they're ruling two different parts of Egypt. The 11th dynasty in Upper Egypt and the 6th dynasty in Lower Egypt. Okay, and this brings it into line with biblical chronology. So, and then after this, we really don't have to do any more overlaps. We come down to the 12th dynasty with Jacob, and at the height of the 12th dynasty, we have Joseph. But I'll leave that for another video. This video is long enough here. Of course, there's a text explanation to go along with this. So over and out, Daniel Gregg.